Okay, let's get started. So for everyone here, did everyone get Node installed with no problems? Raise your hand if you still don't have Node. Great. Okay, let's start then. Okay, so building up on the previous lecture about the purpose of the backend, we will in this lecture / workshop work on actually creating a backend framework which uses NodeJS and Express. Yeah, so let's get started. So in the previous lecture we discussed how the client and server have this relationship of requesting or responding with a resource. And the clients, all which are browsers, will only be able to read HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All basically the three things we learned in last class. On the other side, the server can basically be anything because it's just a computer on the other side, running some logic, doing some computation, and sending you data, basically. So we know but in Node.js and Express happens to use JavaScript. So it's purely coincidental. So it is a very flexible language to do web development in. That's kind of why it's popular, but in general, it can be anything. Ruby, there are other frameworks which rely on different languages. So most common mistake people, beginners, usually make is they cannot distinguish client-side code, which is your front-end code, basically, from your server-side code, which is back-end code, and expect perhaps maybe writing console log in your server-side code, and then expecting your Chrome inspector to print that console log, which obviously won't happen. Okay. So in this workshop, we'll be using Node.js as a server. So it's a framework of how that allows us, gives us more functionality. JavaScript defines functions, etc., so that we can actually build web-related code straight away without setting up very primitive definitions. So point is, just remember and remember again that client-side JavaScript is not the same thing as server-side JavaScript, and you should never be mixing them up together. So also, on top of having a framework, we also need a server architecture, which makes a lot of sense, so that we optimize our system to be as efficient as possible. So for that, we have what's called Express.js. Express is a framework which has all of the routes, views, and public nav.js and everything that is needed to have that architecture running, which we described in the previous lecture, where you have a request coming in from the client. It is processed in the routes, and the routes determines which views to send back to the user. Okay, so I'm guessing there are no questions so far. Okay, so Node, after installing Node, one first thing we should understand is what is called the Node Package Manager, or NPM. We'll be using this to basically run our node. The node command, I believe the install node tutorial tells you to write node space app.js. That's a very one of the most basic commands you can do. If you use commands using npm, it's slightly more higher level. You get more functionality out of it. So basically, it's the app store for Node.js. So all the apps that your web app will be using will be run through npm. So by using this, you will be loading everything you need for the web app. So there are a lot of packages, but and one of them is Express. So let's start with check if npm is installed. Sometimes it does and sometimes it's not. So like just open your terminal bash and type in npm, and hopefully it will have this be installed. Using a Mac, which pretty much everyone is, you have to put sudo in front. As we do that, let's move on. Now to test like the Express actually did install, try running Express workshop-e, but remember, this will create an Express app in the directory you're in, so if you want to get out of the directory where you're in, yeah, you can probably do that. So what this command does is it creates an Express app called Workshop. And the -e says you're using EJS, which is something that we'll be using in the next lecture. So just ignore the fact that about understanding what that E means for now. Okay, so if you haven't still gotten it, it's over there. Let's move on. Okay, so after getting inside your repository you just copied, or inside the workshop directory you just created, run npm install. What this will do is it will install the packages that your Express application will be using, like the actual applications that run your stuff. Okay, assuming we're done, let's continue on. So after installing npm install, you should have had one extra directory appear, which is node modules. So that's basically what should happen. And let's start with looking at what did we just create /pull. Okay. So let's see what's in it. First of all, we have our Express app, the workshop, right? And then inside we have a file called package.json. You guys can just follow along. So this package.json file basically has the info about the app and the list of npm packages that your web app will use. So what is a JSON? It's a completely new file format. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation, which basically says what's inside this is a JavaScript object, or a dictionary in Python, to give you an equivalent. So objects, dictionaries, lookup tables, etc. in any sort of language you see, and it looks something like this. So it has the name, version, and also the dependencies, what kind of applications you're using, and you can see one of the applications says Express. And the other things are just things you just need to make stuff start, get going. Okay, so we wrote npm install before. So what this does is it reads your package.json file and installs node modules depending on what was in your package.json. So let's say we're trying to implement a database into package into our entire web application. What we would do is, instead of just installing the application globally, it's better to include it in the package.json, and this will say that, okay, this app uses this package. So if any other service, for example, when you deploy your website online, they will not be copying your node modules folder because it's simply too large compared to everything else you have. So what it will do is it will install them yourself, any other computer will install the node modules itself, and it will basically look up what to install from package.json. So this is basically your program files or whatever. Okay, and then we have app.js, which is basically the heart of the website, your application. It has all the logic, the overarching what makes your site yours? So open up the file and let's look at what it has inside. So first we have like these first 5, 6 variables. These basically bind like set variable names to the packages that you are using. So like it says require express, require pass, serve fabric onboarding. These are all like packages like which were installed in your like Node modules. Does anyone have a question? No? Okay. Okay, pretty simple. Then we have like these 2 lines which basically tell you where your route files exist. The same route files that we described earlier. These files will contain info about like which link, which URL does what, whether it's a GET request or a POST request. We'll talk about that later. And then we have a variable named app. This basically creates an instance of Express app, and this will basically be like our thing we will be using, like representing our entire app as. So having defined app, we can set several things like where to find the views folder for this app and what kind of view engine to use, which in this case is EJS. We will be like explaining what view engines and templating and handlebars are in, I believe, tomorrow's lecture. So just think of it as like something that renders your like whatever kind of code you have on the back end, converts it into HTML, and sends it to your front end. Yeah, so it also gives you where your views folder is. Then you have like a few methods that gets things up and running. You don't really have to worry about what these are. And another interesting line here is it sets the public directory, which is in your root directory, to look as if it is from the root. So the reason for that is what we have in the public directory is like your assets, images, fonts, CSS, like client-side JavaScript. These should be accessible to the client because the first thing the client does, it requests an makes an HTTP request to fetch the HTML file. After it fetches the HTML file, it looks up what kinds of other like files, like JavaScript files, images, etc. it will need to load the page properly. And those files all exist in your public directory. So because like the way you reference your assets inside your HTML basically is governed by how you define this. But like in general, this is like the easiest way to do it. Okay, then you have like use which routes will. This is kind of like shortcuts. You don't really have to worry about this much. It's like pretty straightforward. If you think about it as if you use routes, this is a shortcut for like dash, and if you use users, it's a like shortcut for the next. Then you have like this chunk of code, which is an error handler. So let's say you have an error in your app, and obviously you want to see what kind of error. This is the code that will like catch errors and display them to you. If you see like if environment is development, you show one type of code, and if it's production, it's a different type of code. This is because while in development, you want to see like the full stack of what kind of errors led to your program crashing. While in production, you don't want to reveal that info to like your users basically. And the last one is module.exports equals app. It just basically exports the app object. Okay, so any questions so far on the code we just covered? No? Okay. So next we have the bin directory, which basically contains code that manages the ports in which the web app works on. So like, in a few seconds, we'll be running our app, and what it should do is it will run on localhost :3000. This means it runs on port 3000 of our localhost. The one file in the bin, the one and only file in the bin directory basically sets this port and does some route few housekeeping stuff. Then we have our routes. So if you open the index routes JS file, you find a few lines of code, which basically do the following. So express router setting variable using express's router method. So we are already using express the app. So if we call this router method, we're basically defining that this is a router. In which case, it knows that what it can do, etc. So it can get get requests, post requests. One example is get the home page. So what this does is, let's say in the URL we punch in localhost 3000. This goes to the root directory, which is basically asking us get the root directory URL from the server. So what it will do, it will go to app.js, come here to router.get, and it will see getting the root directory implies that you must render a view called index with the title of your custom choice. So basically now you have a rendered page given that you have the view called index, which you should in the views directory. And after that, you export your router, which basically goes back to the client. It delivers the final thing to the client. Okay, so we just talked about res.render. Response.render basically gives you the view index back to the user. So let's talk about views. So views is the same thing as described in the previous lecture. It's basically a set of templates that you will be using to display different kinds of pages. So you can have a user's page, a home page, an about page, etc. So more about how the views, what kind of logic and language uses views. It's basically a templating language, and we will be covering that more on Thursday. And the last one we have is the public directory, which we talked about. So basically files that the client is able to request and not have to worry about any permission issues, etc. Okay, so this can be style sheets, client-side JavaScript, image response, etc. Any questions so far? Okay. So first thing I want you guys to try doing is go to your workshop directory and in your terminal try running npm start. This should get your app up and running. And you should be able to, if you did not mess with the ports, you should get your site running on localhost 3000. So, yay, let's do a workshop now, the actual one. Okay, so before this, we start, let's set up a few things. In your route directory and file index.js, make it look like this. Create a variable called db, which has whatever pairs of variables you want. Usually, you probably want, for context, if you want it to make sense, name and fruit. This is not the technically good way to use, create a database. But for now, since we have our database lecture on Friday, we will compromise by creating a temporary small database in memory. And this will basically achieve our purposes for now. During Friday's lecture, we can fix it so that we actually have a good database. And if you want to test whether your app still has no bugs as so far, just try running npm start, and if it throws an error, it means you probably made a typo or error while typing this code out. Okay, so let's move on. If you like get lost, maybe like you can probably ask, like, look at a neighbor perhaps. If like you don't have a neighbor, maybe a staff member. Like this is like pretty straightforward. Okay, so now let's import our code from yesterday. So we made if you remember, a sign up file yesterday. So let's try to integrate that with our views so that we have like our home page to basically be a sign up page. Is everybody clear on that? So let's, okay, let's try this. Okay, so you guys can follow along. Workshop, okay. So here we have this, and in index.js we basically write the code. I need to look at that. Okay, so now let's go to our views and go to index.js. So this, for now, looks like something like this. It has like a basic style CSS written directory, and for now it's something like this. So I'm not sure if I have that here. Don't have it. Let's see this. So what I'll ask you to do, guys, now is in like index.ejs, replace the body with your sign up sheet. Like ignore the part where you have like weird syntax with like that open close like triangle braces equals title. Just ignore that. Delete all of that. And input, basically, this should be yesterday's sign-up sheet. Was it yesterday's? Yeah, it was yesterday's. I will find that code myself.
So this is EGS file. You can't. He's using a JS.
So do you have for Sublime text? Yeah.
Yeah? Is there a link?
You can just open this
I think it's.
EJS is a file.
Yeah, there's a repo for it.
EJS is like a templating.
It's
you don't
at
have to worry about what that means.
okay.
But you can open it.
Go.6148.io/.
Extend it.
Alright.
It looks like it's cool.
Alright, thank you.
Did everyone see this? No? Okay, I'll actually do this with you guys.
So this is, you go to index.ejs and you use Sublime text.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and clone the repo. It's Okay. Can you see it?
So we paste it.
Okay.
I missed it.
Let's go ahead. If you really need the link, just go to that link in the browser, and like your URL should be the GitHub link. Let's open the file. CSS exercise and basically this. Copy this back into here. And we should be good to go. So now let's save this and type npm start. Got an error.
Wait, where is the copy?
Oh, I haven't installed.
Yeah, I have it. You have it? Did you replace it completely?
Okay. Now if we go to
CSS exercise.
local
Why don't you put that here?
3000, yeah, here we have it. Yep. Okay. So task 1 is to create a user list route which gets the DB object which we have in memory to the URL dash user list. Okay, so let's talk about like how to do this first task. Did someone have a question? No? Okay. So first we need to know which route to use. So we go to the user list from the index route because we're basically going to give it a URL user list, and upon access it should give us the data we want on the page. So let's try seeing how this works. Okay, so we are in index.js. So what we want is to get a user list page. So what kind of code do you think would look like? Taking example from how we get the home page. Yes? Okay. Okay. I guess I should start giving these out. I completely forgot about this. Okay. I'll try not to hit your face. If you don't want it, you can give it back to me. It's okay. Okay, so what this means is tell your router to get URL user list. So you write function basically says if the client requests to get the URL user list, you run the following function. So the function has arguments request, response, and next. So what this means is request is a variable that contains info about the request, and the response is the variable you will be sending back. Okay, and let's go with, what kind of response would we send? Yeah, you already answered. Anyone else? Okay. A list of names. So there is like actually a very convenient method in response, which is send. And we send basically dv. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So we send db and let's save. And after we save, we should any edits you do to route or app.js means you're changing the app itself, like express part of the app. That means you have to redeploy, rerun the app. So what you have to do is run npm start again, in which case you restarted your app. And now let's try running express. Oh shoot, I ran the wrong one. Oh, actually it's the correct one, sorry. Oh, while I was updating this template, I forgot and also entered the next stuff for the next parts. Okay, so let's go ahead. So this is our root directory. So let's go to user list. And we have the JSON object, which has all our users.